Dear audience, Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr. Khurram Shehzad. I am from National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. I am going to make a video on reader response theory. This theory is also called affective stylistics, and it is also called reception theory. First of all, let me talk about some of its proponents. We have I.A. Richards, Louis Rosenblatt, Walter Gibson, Norman Holland, and some of the other proponents like Stanley Fish. Before I should talk about reader response theory, I would like to explain some of the terms that you may come across during the lecture. Horizon of expectations. A term developed by Hans Robert Joss to explain how a reader's expectations or frame of reference is based on the reader's past experience of literature and what preconceived notions about literature the reader possesses. Of course, when the reader is going to interact with the text, the reader has got certain preconceived ideas about literature, about the poem that he or she is going to read, about the novel or the drama or the text that he is going to interact with. So he has got some expectations. So horizon of expectations, it means that the past experiences that he is going to bring into the text when he is going to read the text, when he is going to interact with the text. Reader's aesthetic experience is bound by time and historical determinants. So, of course, reader is living in a period, is living in a time. So, time, culture, all these things, the kind of, things that he is going through, he is going to apply them onto the text. Joss also contended that for a work to be considered a classic, it needed to exceed a reader's horizon of expectations. Then there are two more terms that you may come across: implied reader and real reader. Of course, the author, when he is producing a text, he or she has got an implied reader in his or her mind. So keeping those readers in mind, the author is producing the text. So in this way, the author tries to control the reader. In this way, the author tries to control the reading process of the reader. So there is an implied reader and there is a real reader. So we are the real readers. For example, some text is produced in America. Okay, it has got some primary readers, the American readership, and some secondary readers, we people who are living in Pakistan or in some other third world countries or second world countries. So implied reader is kept in the mind of the author, and then there is the real reader. Then there are two types of readings: afferent reading and aesthetic reading. Afferent reading is carried out just to extract information from the text. On the other hand, aesthetic reading is carried out when you keep applying your feelings and emotions and horizon of expectations onto the text, and then you try to understand the text. So that is aesthetic reading. Interpretive communities, a concept articulated by Stanley Fish that readers with an interpretive community share reading strategies, values, and interpretive assumptions. Of course, all societies, they have got their own interpretive communities, so they share certain values, certain ideologies, certain habits, and of course they may come across the same kind of reading process, and they may come out of the reading result, that they kind of strategies that they have applied on the text, and they may come out with the same result. So these were some of the terms that you may come across in reader response theory. Literary theory that focuses on the reader and his or her experience of a literary work is called reader response theory. Dear students, we have read New Criticism. In New Criticism, we have read that the focus is on the words on the page. So, author was not important, reader was not important. That is why they talked about intentional fallacy and affective fallacy. So, intention of the author was not important, and the text that you are reading, okay, the readers should not apply their own feelings and emotions onto the text. New criticism did not believe in these things. So, new criticism excluded the author as well as the reader. But reader response theory brings the reader in the center. It gives importance, significance, value to the reader. It talks about that reader, of course, is going to apply his or her cognitive abilities onto the text. And when he or she is applying cognitive abilities onto the text, and text has got signs and symbols, so the reader is going to interact with the text. When the reader is interacting with the text, some kind of transaction, some kind of business, it goes on. So in this way, reader is given the, central position in reader response theory. It describes what goes on in the reader's mind while reading or viewing, the construction of the text within the reader. So, as it is said that author is the creator of the text, reader is the co-author. Reader is given importance, and reader is said that reader is the co-author of the text, because reader is also going to create meaning out of the text. Reader is going to interpret the text and going to give some kind of decision about the text, that where this text stands, what are its themes, and what other meanings one can find. If we look at the historical perspective, again we have to go back to Plato and Aristotle. They were the people who knew it very well, that what kind of text it is there, and how the text it triggers different kinds of feelings and emotions in the readers, in the viewers. So that is why Plato at least did not like, the viewer, or he knew it very well that when they are watching the drama, so it is going to trigger certain feelings and emotions. So Aristotle and Plato, they also highlighted the role of the reader. Okay, so in tragedy, he talked about that it should cleanse, it should purge of the feelings and emotions which are triggered in the human beings. And then human beings, they should stay rational. They should not become emotional, that they are going to react, and in this way they may not become rational. So they knew it very well. The text, it contains certain elements which can trigger the feelings and emotions of the viewer, of the reader. Reader response theory: text is not the most important component. The reader is the one who creates the text as much as the author does, based on rhetoric, the art of persuasion. I have just highlighted, because Aristotle and Plato, they were talking about the persuasion. They were talking about rhetoric, and they knew that rhetoric, it can trigger the feelings and emotions of the viewers or of the readers. The role of the reader cannot be omitted from our understanding of literature. Readers do not passively consume the meaning presented to them by an objective literary text. Rather, they actively make the meaning they find in literature. So, the role of the reader is highlighted. Reader is very active. Reader is not supposed to be passive. The one who is just consuming the text, the one who is, agreeing with whatever he or she sees on the page. Rather, The reader should read against the grain. The reader should apply his or her cognitive abilities onto the text and then should try to understand the signs and symbols which are residing in the text, the kind of, metaphors and similes, synecdoches, metonymies, which have been used by the author. And then the reader is going to interact, reader is going to do the transaction with the text, and reader is going to come out with the kind of meaning that he or she sees in it. It's a very subjective kind of, interpretation that readers are going to make. Charles Dressler, has given a very good idea when he talks about reader response theory. He creates a story that there are people who are very rich and they have got a very big bungalow, and they have invited the people in the locality to attend the birthday party in their homes. So on that day when they come, the doors of the bungalow, they are closed. Now people cannot go, cannot enter the house. So some of the children, they are trying to peep through the windows, some through the doors, some through some other cleavages, and everybody is looking at something different in the house. So they are coming out of their own interpretation, they are coming out of their own understandings of the scenes, of the things that they see in the bungalow. So in this way, everybody is looking at the text from a different perspective, and everybody, when he or she is applying the cognitive abilities onto the text, is coming out with a different kind of result. So all kinds of interpretations are to be given value according to some of the proponents of reader response theory. Reader is necessary third party in the relationship that constitutes the literary work. So there is reader, there is text, and then meanings are created. It raises theoretical questions about whether our responses to a text are the same as its meanings, whether a work can have as many meanings as we have responses to it, and whether some responses are more valid than or superior to others. Now, these are the questions that usually people ask, that is it anything goes story? Remember, it is not anything goes story. No doubt, when you are interacting with the text, it may trigger certain ideas, certain feelings and emotions in you, in the readers, and it may remind you of an event which you have already had, which you have already experienced in your life. So while giving the interpretation, you can add that experience and you can relate your experience with the text, which, the kind of ideas that they have triggered these ideas in you, that they have reminded you of the event of your past life. You can write that in the interpretation. But what you are doing is that you are relating your personal experiences with the text. There is something in the text which inspired you, which asked you to think of an event which happened to you in the past. So now you are relating that experience with the text. So anything goes is not the story. No doubt your interpretation is subjective, but when you are making use of the methodology which is given by reader response theorists, so in this way your interpretation is objective as well. It is subjective as well as objective. So you are making use of the strategies that reader response theorists have given. Usually, they talk about or they use new critical approach when they are giving the analysis of the text. And in new criticism, we have read words on the page. They play a very important role. So all kinds of words, all kinds of sentences that you see in the text, okay? So your interpretation, it should come out of those words. It should relate to those words and experiences that you see in the text. So metonymies, similes, synecdoches, metaphors, all the literary devices that you come across in the text, your interpretation is coming out of them, and you are relating your subjective experiences with the things which are there in the text. So one methodology that they use, one approach that they use, is of close reading, is of literary new critical theory. And the second approach that they use is of structuralism. And in structuralism, we try to understand the inherent structures of the text, that who is the narrator, what is the story, what is the plot, what is the narrative, what is the narration, who is the focalizer, is it first person narration, second person narration, third person narration, okay, and who is the narratee, what is the implied reader, what is the real reader. So when you are looking at these internal structures of the text and you are interacting with the text, and then you are producing your meanings out of the text and you are giving your interpretation. So in this way, you are making use of structuralism. And there are people, they believe that every individual's interpretation should be given value. So they are the people, they are individualists. Then there are the people who are experimentists. They believe what they did was they were the teachers. They asked the students to read the poems and give their own responses. So they carried out such type of tests in the classroom, and in this way they collected the data, they got the responses of the students, and they tried to understand that what similarities and what differences they exist in the responses of the students. And in this way they were called experimentists. And third kind of division that we can find in reader response theory, they are the uniformists. They believe that there is an interpretive community. So within the interpretive community, people, they share their values, emotions, feelings, ideologies, okay, and in this way the style, and they know that what are poems meant to them and what are the literary interpretation of the particular poem or the text that you are carrying out. So in this way usually they have all together or almost the same responses. So one kind of division that we find in reader response theory is of individualists, the second is the experimentists, and third is the uniformists. And I have just told that they make use of new critical theorists or structuralism in their approaches when they are giving the interpretation of the text. Stanley Fish also talked about affective stylistics or affective way of reading, where it means that how feelings and emotions of the people, they are affected by the text. Well, dear students, look at this diagram. This diagram graphically illustrates the principles of reader response theory. Under the reader column, consider what personal characteristic, qualities, or history might be relevant to your reading of the text. As a reader, where you stand. On the other side, under the heading text, write what textual properties affect your reading, such as use of dialect, narrative structure, punctuation, sentence length, meter, similes, synecdoches, literary devices. After completing the right and left side, students then investigate how their personal response and the characteristics of the text create meaning. They write their statements about what the text means to them in the middle of the chart. So, reader, meaning, and text. So, first of all, reader, his or her past experiences, his or her knowledge of the world, his or her horizon of expectations, and then text, what the text is giving, the kind of language, the literary devices, the words on the page, and then when reader and text, they are doing the transaction, what kind of meanings one can come out with. In this way, interpretation will be carried out. Again, look at this example, reader, meaning, and text. Here you write personal characteristics that relate to text you are analyzing. Text, how you write. Here you write characteristics of the text you are reading, such as vocabulary, sentence length, type of literary work, punctuation. Together, these make up the way a reader gets individual meaning. Who you and what you are reading results in meaning. So, this is how transaction goes on between the reader and the text. Well, dear students, some of the questions which you should keep in your mind when you are dealing with the text or applying reader response theory are: what did the author intend for you to feel while reading this work, and how did he or she make you feel it? What are you dependent on in this work to help you make sense of what you read? Descriptive passages, the narrator's voice, or contrasting viewpoints of characters? Do the events fall into a pattern you have met before? Are there opposites in the text that surprise you, inform you, keep you from anticipating what is coming? How do your previous experiences with this genre set up your expectations for how this text will operate? What images and events in the story are you already conditioned to approve or disapprove? What does the point of view affect or control your understanding? What information has been withheld from you? How does that affect your inferences? What similarities do you recognize between this work and other works? For example, in terms of themes, setting, or characters, it is also called intertextuality. The following questions can help you discover your role in creating the text you read. What did you expect to feel while reading this work? What was unsettling in what you read? How did you adapt to what made you uncomfortable in such a way that it more clearly fit what you desired? With what or whom did you most closely identify in the work? What identification gave you the most pleasure, the most displeasure? Did the work fit your picture of the way life is? What does the work fail to tell you about characters and events? What imagery or personal material did you use to supply what was missing? What memories does this work recall for you? What gaps and vague outlines did you find yourself filling in? Because for implied reader, the author kept the text in mind and created the text. For real reader, the author did not know that what kind of real reader is going to read the text, so he must have left certain gaps. So your job is to fill those gaps. What aspects of the text invite you to respond as that implied reader? What contributions did you perceive in the text? For example, characters who represent differing viewpoints, how did you resolve them? Well, dear students, the advantages of reader response theory are that it recognizes that different people view works differently and the people's interpretations change over time. The disadvantages are it intends to make interpretation too subjective. It does not provide adequate criteria for evaluating one reading in comparison to another. Well, dear students, in our today's class, we have talked about reader response theory, and we have read that this theory highlights the role of the reader. It gives significance to the reader because reader is interacting with the text. Reader is doing transaction with the text. Reader is applying his or her cognitive abilities onto the text. Reader is applying his or her mind onto the text. And of course, he has certain expectations because he has already read so many of the poems, so many of the novels and dramas. So he has certain expectations. And authors, when they are creating the text, they have implied reader in their mind. And the real reader finds the gaps in the text and does the transaction with the text. And then in this way, he or she comes up with the interpretation. No doubt subjectivity is involved, but anything goes story, it does not, give consent to. So anything or any interpretation that you are making, it should come out of the text. You should make claims. You should build your argument from the text and the experiences that you are relating with the text. Okay. They should also be triggered from the text that you are reading. So your things, it should come out of the text. You should quote the text in the argument that you are developing, and in this way, of course, you are applying your subjective abilities onto the text and giving the interpretation. Thank you very much.